if you don't have this concept of looking after other people and not hoarding, the extreme case is all the money in the world goes into the coffers of one person. We're not a long way from that now.
I think you see it in our society now, where we are literally sitting there obsessing about where we are compared to other people, and part of that is the consumption culture. We compare ourselves to other people rather than thinking, well, hang on, what is the wider societal goal? What are the real benefits here?
So then we're living in a world where we're running faster and faster just to keep up, when actually what we need to do is stop running for a minute, take a step back and question the very fabric of what we're being asked to do in the first place.
Is our education system failing our young people? Are they being encouraged to not innovate and to not think about society? And is that something that is making the world a less good place for us all to live in? Well, that's the question we'll be asking on the Manna Journey tonight. As ever, Phillip Ullmann is here, but also Richard Gerver, who is an educational expert and former head teacher.
The Manna Journey is the catalyst for change in our world. It's a consistent source of truth for the next generation and current leaders. Our mission is to change the world by reframing our current governance, by using ancient wisdom to solve modern problems, and by shaping innovative new businesses to have a culture of pursuit of purpose.
That means my whole life is already mapped out for me, and my whole life is mapped out at being below average.
And that results in a mental health epidemic, which is what we're seeing in society.
But it doesn't just do that, Philip, because what it does is those kids may not be academic, right? What we're measuring is the kids that are high-performing academics, average academics, below average academics. Those kids may be extraordinarily talented at something. They may see the world. So, for example, autism, right? Autism is a label given to children and often seen as a negative. Many, many autistic people have extraordinary minds, but the academic system says they've got special needs. We'll just have to try and push them up to as close to average as we can, when actually we should be saying, those people have got extraordinary abilities. How can we harness that?
It's interesting when you're talking about special needs, because many of the things that we label as being a disability actually are a huge advantage. And there's no doubt that autistic people have some serious advantages over the general population, but that's not the way it's seen, because we're forcing people into one particular model all the time.
I was lucky enough recently to visit the Royal School for the Deaf. And what's extraordinary is they have an extraordinary superpower. Their visual cues are amazing. Their ability to communicate, their use of body language and facial expression is truly staggering. You know, and it was really interesting because the principal turned round to me after we'd been there a couple of hours and he said, "How's it make you feel?" I said, "I feel really uncomfortable because I don't understand what they're talking about." He said, "How do you think these kids feel in the outside world every minute of every day? And as a result, their talent and their level of self-worth is undermined. But you come into their environment and what you see is extraordinary."
It's interesting, you know, back in the old feudal system where people, the landed gentry, were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and they had lots of property and they were wealthy, upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey type syndrome. The people that didn't feel that bad because they could say to themselves, "I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth," and therefore it was unfortunate, but they didn't blame themselves. Now we move on to this concept of meritocracy, where if they don't achieve, you can say, well, you could have got the A-levels, you could have got the GCSEs, you could have got the degree. It's your fault.
Yeah.
And therefore they start to feel bad because they can't blame it on the way they were born. They feel it themselves. And therefore people start to, because we're focusing on meritocracy, it's just another way of giving certain people the advantages. And therefore people start to feel mentally inept. Because they feel that it's my fault.
And it comes back to what you were saying, because then what they also think, because it's the way we talk to them, if they didn't get the grades they needed to get, you didn't work hard enough. So then what happens is we grow into society where we get this job in an organisation and the boss comes in and says, "You haven't met your targets." Your immediate instinct is, "I need to work harder." So then we're living in a world where we're running faster and faster just to keep up, when actually what we need to do is stop running for a minute, take a step back and question the very fabric of what we're being asked to do in the first place.
But funnily enough, I mean, Philip's going to go on with more of this section, but this section of the Bible very clearly is comparing two things. It's saying we accept that in Egypt you have all the trinkets, you might have slightly better food or whatever, but you are a slave. Whereas out in the wilderness, you've got community.
Yeah.
And of course, what happens in this biblical, thing is after a period of time, skills start to develop. You know, goldsmiths and silversmiths come about. People are carpenters. They're only brick makers in Egypt. And yet, because they're working together and because they've become a community, suddenly skills are starting to be developed. And I think that's what's extraordinary about it.
Okay, so, Richard, I want to almost ask you as we start progressing, because so God says to Moses, this principle is meet people's needs every day. Create a society, not where you're meeting the needs of a king, that each one of you is ensuring that you meet the needs every single day. And I'm going to ask you how you would educate it. But at the moment, that's the principle that God says to Moses. The second question is very interesting. He says this: it will be on the 6th day, and when they prepare that which they brought in, it will be double that which they've gathered each day. Now, what this means is they're not gathering double on Friday. They are actually yielding their productivity on Friday. So they do the same job on Friday. Yeah. And suddenly they got double as much food, or in our world, double as much money in the bank account. What do you think that's addressing? So God doesn't say how to educate it. He says there's a problem that some people end up with more money in their bank account. You understand the question is, what do you do with it? Because that's another problem that we face in society. What happens if I've got more than I need? I've done the same job, and God is trying to say, no, I'm going to teach you when you earn more by doing the same. On Friday, they're not working double as hard. It's yielding double as much. So that God is trying to educate them, one, in a daily cycle, which we can look at. And second of all, what happens if you suddenly have a windfall and huge amounts of money come into your account? That's something people need to educate, because that's almost, Richard, what causes the slavery. Because if you use that money in the wrong way, what happens if you have this money come into your bank account and you continue to hoard it and you continue to push up prices of property, of financial assets, what does it do? If you use that money, it enslaves.
Yes.
So God is trying to teach us two lessons. One, daily cycle, which we'll come on to, and two, what do you do with this problem of earning too much? So that's God to Moses. And let's see what actually happens in the story to see how this is educated. So that's the lessons that God is trying to teach. Okay, so then it carries on, and Moses then says to the Israelites, this is what God has commanded: gather each person according to what they can eat, only according to what they eat. An omer, which is a measure of food according to the size of the head, i.e., big people like me eat more, adults eat more, and according to the number of souls that there are in the word Owen in your tent. But I don't think it actually means a tent. The word is the same as hallelujah. It's something that needs to radiate outwards. So what it's saying, Moses interpreting, he's not saying to the people, do a daily cycle. He's saying, only take what you need to eat. So look at your family, or look at look at the age, look at the sex, and give them as much food as they need to eat. Yes. So he's not telling them, you always told me, you've got to get people to experience education. He's not telling them daily quota. He's gradually, as far as I can see, Richard, he's building it up and saying the first thing you do is only take what you need, no more. Now, in fact, it works. If you look at what happens in the next verse, they actually only take what they need and no more. But that's food. Why do you think, in food terms, people only take what they can eat and no more?
Well, look, because doesn't it give you a basic standard? It makes sure that everybody's looked after in society. And I would argue that what continually comes out of this, with every line that you go through, it's God encouraging them to be a community and saying the dream you're chasing is to have good relationships, to have a good community, to have a good society. And the rest of it is dealt with because the rest of it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
I would suggest.
I think that's exactly right. And I would think in education terms, if I look at it, through the lens of an educator, what we need to do is make sure that every young person is entitled to develop the educational skills they need. Yes. So all children need to be literate. All children need to be numerate, right? All children need basic skills. But then what we need is to work as a community and as a society to say, but we shouldn't all try and be the best at this, right? Because I don't need as much food of that as you do. That nourishes you because that's the direction. This is where I need to be nourished, and this is the level I need to be nourished at. But also then, I'm bringing my skill and knowledge to bear to your weaknesses, and we will work together to create the whole. So for me, a lot of this is about saying, and by the way, it's also saying, particularly in those schools like the ones I worked in areas of social deprivation, we need to understand where these children are coming from before we try and teach them anything. So, for example...
Sorry, let me just say this. The other thing that's very, very similar to what we were talking about in education and this piece is this. The benchmark for success in the Egyptian society is who is the best brickmaker. Yeah. Now, that's not the best person, that's not the best singer, that's not the best academic, that's not the best flute player, that's the best brickmaker. And so when you create a society like that, where the only one skill is valued, every other skill disappears.
Absolutely right.
So, but what it's doing very clearly is, first of all, at the end of the chapter, by the way, it defines this OMA as a specific amount. It's setting a maximum amount, a maximum need. So this is about need, Richard, not greed. This is not saying take as much as you want. It's saying we're all human beings. We can only eat a certain amount, rather than the current system that we have, which allows you to continue to accumulate more and more and more and more and more endlessly until you've got billions. This is saying, no, you don't need more. It's focusing on the food. And I'll be honest with you, you get sick if you eat too much. And therefore, there's a natural inbuilt control with food. So the metaphor is good. Because think about, and the word manna actually sounds like manna. I think the words are related. So it's saying, in apportioning your resources, don't take huge amounts and effectively only take based on age and sex and take what you need. Now, what that means in monetary terms is this is real. So what we described at the beginning was a world where we haven't got money because, as we said, money is literally loaned into existence. Here, food is real. And the old gold was real. So it's always look at something real that you can get your head around rather than this substance that no one understands, and start to train people to only take what they need every single day. And therefore, they start to think, okay, I'm only going to take what I need. And in fact, they do it because they get sicker. You actually find that the Israelites don't get this wrong. They actually only take what they need. So point number one is only take what you need, not what you want, because almost look at you. I don't need more than a certain amount of food.
Philip, isn't most greed, and I'm not saying in every single case, to do with two things: fear and vilification? So effectively, what you were talking about in schools is you're saying to people, if you don't work hard, you'll be out on the streets. Yeah. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. So that's the fear element, and then the vilification. I pull out my mobile phone. I look through all these social media platforms, and it's Porsches and Lamborghinis and yachts and all this sort of thing. And you as a young person are vilified if you don't live that lifestyle. It's constant. It's served up in your bedroom on your phone to you every single minute of every day.
It's really interesting when we talk, isn't it? Because this thing about fear fascinates me, right? And the thing about greed, because if you've ever not had, or if you live in fear of not having, I live in fear of being hungry. I live in fear of not having enough money to put a roof over my head. When there is a time of plenty, you hoard, right? My perfect example is this, right? So the pandemic comes along and the people in Australia saw that the factories in China were shutting down. So irrationally, but kind of rationally, they went, we need toilet paper, right? We need toilet paper and we need as much. And of course, what they did was they went and hoarded as much. And suddenly they thought, even though there's this global disease nobody understands and it's causing chaos around the world, as long as I have toilet paper in my home, I'll be safe and secure, because we're pre-wired, we're educated to believe, seek out certainty, then grasp as much of it as and that'll make you
and keep
secure.
it in the nest.
Yeah, right. And so then what happened was we all thought, crazy Australians, that would never happen here. And irrationally, we didn't have. And by the way, the Australians thought that they were going to have a toilet paper shortage because the factories in China were shutting down, right? We saw the videos over here on our side. Oh my God, we need toilet paper. Don't ask me why. I've just seen videos that say, oh, I feel better now. I mean, there may be this global illness that's killing people in hundreds of thousands, but because I've got an igloo of toilet paper, I'll be okay. And actually, that's part of the danger of the myth, that people hoard, they grab, and greed almost comes out of that fear, right? I fear. So you look at animals, right? Animals, I've got a dog. My dog is well fed. In fact, my vet tells me my dog is, and I hope she's not watching this, fat, right? Sorry if you're watching, Martha. But the truth is, animals are hardwired to believe that winter's coming. So if there's a piece of bread cast out on the street, or a sandwich, or a kid's dropped a whatever, that dog will grab it and eat it, no matter, and it'll eat it even if it's full up, because it doesn't know when its next meal hardwired's coming from. And I think what we've got to do in education is actually move people away from that reflex of thinking winter's coming.
100%. Let me just tell you the extreme. Again, the Bible is incredibly brilliant on this. If you look at you probably never noticed this, but the earlier Pharaoh, there are 7 years of abundance, and they're told there's going to be 7 years of famine. Joseph actually recommends to Pharaoh, hoard it, keep it for 7 years, but then distribute it, a bit like the lunar cycle. Build up your stock, but not to make money, not to continue growing it, but to use it in the second 7 years to meet people's needs, which is what we should do. What does Pharaoh say? Oh, no, charge for it, and charge money, even though it's been a gift from God, effectively. And what he does is he continues to charge. Of course, when you've got a monopoly, you charge whatever you like. So in the first year, if you look at the story, this is in Genesis 47, he gets all the money. The whole money becomes his. And then then all the animals become his. And then in the second year, all the land becomes his. And then everyone becomes a slave. So what that's depicting is what you describe. If you don't have this concept of looking after other people and not hoarding, the extreme case is all the money in the world goes into the coffers of one person. We're not a long way from that now.
Yeah. But of course, in Egypt, what you're talking about is the dog-eat-dog world, which we recognise, which is, you've got to be the fastest at making bricks, and that becomes the thing that you're obsessed about. I think you see it in our society now, where we are literally sitting there obsessing about where we are compared to other people, and part of that is the consumption culture. We compare ourselves to other people rather than thinking, well, hang on, what is the wider societal goal? What are the real benefits here?
Let me move to the next verse. So God has said, you've got to teach them through a daily quota. At the moment, he said, just take what you need based on the number of moments. He hasn't yet told them the daily quota. But the next thing is Moses actually says to them, don't leave over to the morning. This is the next bit. So up until now, they've done it. They've been told only to gather what they need, because there's the natural limits of the human body. Then they're told, don't leave over until the morning. You've got to consume it within 24 hours. What do you think that's about? That if you tell people don't hoard it till the morning, what's the message to the people?
Take what you need, because whatever's left over is going to disappear. So there's no point in hoarding.
There's no point in hoarding. So you're educating people to this starts to become a daily quota, because if you know that you're not going to be able to keep it overnight, there's no point in hoarding, and therefore you're ending up treating each day as it is. So Richard, you talk about experiential. So he could have said to them at the beginning, meet your needs daily. But you always told me you've got to start with an experience. He says to them, one, take what you need, which they do. Then he says, don't leave over until the morning. This they get wrong. They actually do leave over in the morning. Therefore, I think they're experiencing the fact that they're feeling insecure, and therefore leave it over to the morning. They say, no. And it then decays.
And also what he's doing, from my point of view, is he's teaching them to be, the problem with hoarding is it's an abstract. So within education, right, we say to kids, hoard your knowledge, hoard it, build it. And when kids say, but why? We go, because one day it'll be important to you. Right? One day you'll understand how you're going to use all this knowledge. Now, a number of things are true about that. The first is kids become disaffected pretty quickly, because kids are hardwired to need experience in the moment now. We don't live as children in a future world. None of us do. We live in the moment as kids, right? So the first thing is we become bored pretty quickly, and we go, well, I'm now 17. I've been in formal education for 12 years. I'm still waiting to use what you taught me when I was 6. So now I'm going to just tune out, if you don't mind. And the other thing is, right, what we've been hoarding in education is rotten by the time they're 21, because we were teaching, our generation were taught to live in an analog world, right? The world isn't analog anymore. It's beyond digital. So everything we were taught was irrelevant. Now what we're seeing is the world moves so fast that what you might teach a 7-year-old today, by the time they're 18, it's obsolete. So we've also got to, the reason why experiential learning is so important to me is a number of reasons. One, because we're emotive creatures, right? Sensory experience is what logs in our memory. It's what drives us, right? Our emotions drive us. It has to matter for the now. It has to make sense for the now, because if it matters for the now and it makes sense for the now, you can control what you're learning, and then you can learn how to adapt it, to use it with the evolution of time and existence.
But sorry, can I just say this very quickly, because I think it's really interesting. There was a TV show recently which was literally about a school that deprograms people who've come from slave labour camps. Wow. It was called The Windermere Children, and it's about children from the Holocaust, Jewish children who were brought to the United Kingdom. And one of the things that's interesting about them is the first day at this new school, what is the first thing that happens over dinner? Everybody steals the bread and runs off and hides it. Because, of course, they are so programmed into this. I've got to maximise this. And, of course, one of the things that they had to be taught was there is no point in stealing the bread. It's fine. You know, this is not the world you live in anymore. And I think that just shows you that that level of slavery does lead to greed. And it's just a very obvious example.